We're very blessed today at Cross of Glory to be celebrating 50 years, a group of believers here to worship our Lord, to spread the gospel message of Jesus Christ crucified for the sins of the whole world, and to educate our adults, our children, but also those of the community. So it's really been a blessing at Cross of Glory for these first 50 years. My name is Michael Fetcenko. I'm the chairman of the Board of Elders. It's been a privilege for me to have been a member here at Cross of Glory now for 33 years with my wife Kathy. But even after so long, 33 years, I'm a rookie compared to our distinguished guest today, Shirley Drayer, who's been one of the founding members of Cross of Glory 50 years ago. So Shirley, welcome and thanks for being here today. I wonder if you could tell us your story about what was happening 50 years ago.
Okay. Sing a great song, new song to the Lord, and He does marvelous things. And we're going to walk through some of the marvelous things that He has accomplished here at Cross of Glory. I'm going to start out. I was raised in Nebraska, born and raised, and my family had me baptized right shortly after birth. They enrolled me in Sunday school and then in confirmation class, and I attended church there in Lincoln. Those were the days that I was learning what marvelous things the Lord has done for us. So my husband and I met in high school, and we were married, and he continued on to college. And when he had graduated from there, he took a job with General Motors. So the Lord moved us from Nebraska up to Michigan. We soon after we moved here, we did live in an apartment for a while, but we bought a house in Warren. And previous to living in Warren, we had an occasion to visit Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we were so impressed with all the greenery and the trees and everything there. And as we talked about it, we said it would be nice to have a house that had mature trees. But the one we were living in, we had started all our trees and everything. So in the summer of, I believe it was 1974, that he went on a testing trip in Arizona, and while he was gone, I was working out in my front yard, and a car pulled up, and the woman who was driving stated that she was a real estate agent, and she had a client with her who was interested in buying one of the houses in our subdivision. And she wanted to know if I knew of any that were for sale at that time, and I couldn't think of any, but I invited her into my house to let her see what that builder's work was. And she decided after viewing it that she would like to buy it. So when my husband called that night, I said, "Honey, I've sold the house."
Was he happy to hear that?
And of course he was quite surprised, had no idea what I was talking about. So when he returned from his trip, the Lord had planted this seed that we were maybe, going to look for a house, and so we did. And we used to come out to the Romeo, Washington area, and just for rides on Sundays. So we came out, and we came down Campground to 30 Mile Road. And my husband took a turn to go towards Van Dyke. And there were, when we came to one of the south turning streets. We drove down that road, and as we were about to take the bend and go back to Van Dyke, there was his house up a little bit on a hill, and it had all these beautiful trees.
And was that the Killarney house?
That was Killarney, it was on the bend of Killarney and Kildare. So it wasn't for sale. We just saw the house and thought it was great, all the trees and everything. So he turned and went down to Van Dyke and decided to turn around and go back. So we drove back up to the house with all the green trees and everything. And my husband parked the car at the end of that driveway. And he got out of the car and walked over to an empty lot that was accompanying that. And while he was out of the car, the man from the treed house came out of his house, walked down the driveway, came to me and said, "Are you interested in buying my house?" And we bought the house. It was 1974.
And what was happening in this area then?
I really don't remember a whole lot. It was a lot of open grounds. There was an apple orchard north of us here of the church, and none of this over here was developed at all.
When you moved into this house, were you still going down to Warren to worship? There was
Yes.
not really a church here then.
Right, right.
And so that's actually what I wanted to ask you about. So what was going through your mind about when you and others thought of starting a mission church in this area? What was happening at that time in your mind?
Well, we were thinking that it was quite a distance to go down to Warren to church, and I don't really recall anything in particular that as soon as we moved into the house, within a few weeks, I wrote to the mission board at our offices in Milwaukee and asked if it would be possible for us to start a church. And within the month, I think the mission board met at our house, and we had maybe 3 families. I'm not sure exactly on any more of that.
So the original starting point was you wrote to the church body, the synod, asking whether you could start a church in this area. They came out and interviewed you and some of the other potential prospects.
Right.
And so what happened then? Did you have to provide information on the area, or, tell us a little bit about how that process went.
I don't really recall. My husband probably was handling that part more than I was.
But it wasn't automatic. You had to make basically an application, and they had to consider, maybe lots of other people that wanted to start a church, and because there's some money that the synod had to invest in this originally. So it was a process of application and providing information. I remember your letter was actually around November of 1973, and they came out and saw you in December of 1973. So some point during 1974, so 50 years ago, you got approval to start the church.
Do exploratories.
Yeah, so it wasn't really an official grant, it was an exploratory. And what was happening at that exploratory? Were you worshiping here, or were you still worshiping in Warren?
No, we were worshiping in Indian Hills, which is just up on 29.
So really Indian Hills Elementary, right over there.
That's where we met.
That's where you started worshiping. Do you remember the pastor at that time? Were you meeting you were
We
meeting
had-
in the school?
We had John Henderson came up from our shepherd.
So is that the same pastor who was at our shepherd? He was the sort of he was doing both
Exploratory.
churches at that time? So
He
he was the pastor at our
Yes,
shepherd.
yes.
But he
then
was
he
coming
our
up here also.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
The most marvelous part was beyond getting the house and all that and getting the church started, was how fast it moved with the mission board and all. I mean, it was just, it was fun.
Well, I heard it from the original letter back in 1973. In September of 1974, you got approval from the mission board we were granted mission status in September of 1974.
Right.
But at that time, you also got a name for the church. How did the term Cross of Glory, or how did the name Cross of Glory happen?
I just remember Nancy Bennett was the one that brought that to our midst, and it was just agreed upon by all the people who were at that meeting.
I heard that we were paraphrasing a hymn from that time.
Might have been.
Cross of Christ, I glory, something like that, and Cross of Glory came as a result of that?
Could be, I don't recall.
So now we're in 1974, and you're still worshiping at Indian Hills then. How did you go about, the facility that we're in today, how did you go about getting that started?
Well, we called our first pastor, Pastor Elliott.
So he replaced Pastor Henderson and became our first pastor at Indian Hills in 1975?
I would assume that's the way it went.
When you look at today's Cross of Glory, would you like to thank anybody or express your joy or anything like that?
Yes, very much so. In giving my history, I wanted to show the Lord's marvelous things that He did. And in the baptism and in the instruction I received. And I wanted to let you know how much the Lord has been with me all during those years.